All right. Welcome back to another Elevated Marketing podcast. I feel like I always say all right. I don't know if it's like the show from my age of all right, all right, all right.
Maybe so.
Well, if you're new to the show, my name is Jennifer.
And I'm Brenna. Hello, hello.
And we talk about topics to help your business grow. We really try to simplify digital marketing topics into relatable content that you can talk about. So, speaking of content, we want to talk about probably, in my mind, what I feel like is marketing is content.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have pieces of content, then you have no marketing.
Yeah, it's definitely the fuel that drives all efforts. It's our strategies are certainly centered around content, and we all need content.
Yeah. Like I feel like that's something that we do really well is mastering like what the content is, and it drives everything else. You
Well,
know, and it's evolving, like the type
yeah.
of content and what kind of content people want. And so really thinking through like what your content strategy is and mapping that out is super important.
Yeah. Well, and I think the term content has kind of changed its definition over the years. Like, at least for me, when I think about content, maybe even 3, 4 years ago, I would only be thinking about blog posts, and that's not the case anymore. The content can mean a lot of things, in a lot of formats and on different platforms. But
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about that. When you're starting to come down and think about your content strategy, I think no matter what, the first thing you have to start with is understanding who you are building content for, who is this audience, right?
yes, and that's same goes with any sort of, I think, digital marketing effort. Is you have to know who you're talking to. We're not talking to a wall.
Well, and a lot of marketing bias comes in here
Mhm.
where, sometimes when you go to, develop your content strategy, you start thinking about like how you would think, and you are not the client. And so you have to build what is in marketing terms called a buyer persona. And it's who are they? What are their job titles? What are their pain points? What do they already know and feel about your product and service? What platforms do they use? We wrote an entire blog post on buyer persona, but until you really understand who this person is and how they feel and the words they use, you can't really move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to be able to resonate with your audience in a fashion that not only they understand, but they relate to. I think we live in a world where there's a lot of sameness and there's a lot that people can kind of go blind to. So, really honing in on your buyer persona and really, I guess, evolving that it's very important.
Yeah, sameness is not going to work for marketing.
No, no.
You definitely have to push the envelope and stand out. And so, that brand, what we would call brand voice and style, is how your company does things differently. We were talking with a plumber yesterday and, having a conversation with them, and we're going to have to pull out from them how they are different, because there are a lot of choices when it comes to a plumber. And so we need to ask questions like, you know, what's your mission statement? And they might not have thought about that. Like, what does your business stand against? Like, what is that? Like, I don't want to be that. And sometimes I can help you, get who you are. tell me about how you got started. What are the things that are of values to you, and that can really give you that brand voice and style, and understanding all that when it comes to building a content strategy.
For sure. And there's a lot of saturation of content too. And so if you can really keep your content personalized to your brand voice and style, then that's just going to help your content stand out more in the long run, not only for user experience, but SEO too.
Yeah, yeah. And I said it earlier, like trying to get out of your own bias. Like when you think about your content strategy, you have to think through that consumer. Like, would I actually share this?
Mm-hmm.
Would I save this? Is this of value? Is this something that I would want to know more about as it pertains to my, product or service? And if it doesn't, you got to go back to the drawing board for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think this could get a little tricky trying to think like a consumer. You had mentioned bias. And while it's important to think like a consumer, it's more important to think like your consumer.
Yeah.
We're all consumers in some fashion. But what is your consumer thinking?
Yeah. So, once you've kind of established your buyer persona, you've established your brand voice and style, you're thinking like your consumer, you need to then also keep your consumer in mind. Like, what is their buyer journey that they typically go through in order to buy your product or service? I think we all want to think that somebody sees something and they instantly buy it, and that might be, the bubble gum that is at the counter, or the tea that you go buy when you go to the grocery store, or gas station, I should say, rather. But what are the things people in marketing terms first think about when it comes to, oh, well, I'm just now starting to think about whether or not I want that? So that top of funnel.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's the middle of the funnel? Okay, I know I have a problem. What is it that could be possible solutions? And then bottom of the funnel, okay, I'm ready to make a decision, who's available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think when it comes to specifically written content, so maybe thinking about blog posts or guides, maybe structure pages, I think it's really easy to kind of skip the top of funnel and middle of funnel, because at the end, there's always going to be a call to action of contact us today. And while that's important, there are steps that you have to take in order for them to be ready to contact you.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to, kind of skip and miss those steps, but they're equally as important.
Well, it's, kind of the sales and marketing together, whether or not you're on the sales team or you're on the C-suite, it's all about the close.
Mm-hmm.
And, the marketer, though, is sometimes more understanding of, we want the close, but we don't want to be desperate. And so when you can add value first, so like top of funnel, helpful blog posts, videos, social snippets, middle of the funnel, case studies, white papers, webinars, bottom of the funnel, like those testimonials, demos, product design dives, why to do business with us,
Mm-hmm.
why to do it now, like those type of, in that order, will help somebody make that buying decision and be helpful instead of pushy. Nobody wants to be sold, but everybody wants to buy.
Yes, absolutely. And I think a lot of what can come out of these different funnels and, really understanding the top, middle, and bottom are some different evergreen content pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And those certainly will stand true, I think, most about top of funnel and middle of the funnel when it comes to that evergreen content. But you certainly want to have a blend, right, of your different content intents.
Yeah, and that evergreen content is really content that will live forever. So they're basic questions and concerns that people have about your product and service. And you got to be real careful in today's time that you can't be too basic,
Mm-hmm.
because could AI answer that question? You got to ask that. And so when you are creating the content, trying to take that unique spin, but there's still basic questions. And then, as you alluded to, then there's, just high impact, meaning that, like, okay, like everybody has this question when it comes to this product or service. So
Mm-hmm.
I have to answer it on my website, even if maybe AI is going to answer it too. But if somebody gets to my website from another source than AI, then I have to have it there so
Mm-hmm.
that they understand, this is how we handle that.
Or maybe AI is using you as a source to get these answers, and you are now the source for that people can then find through their AI
Yeah.
searching.
So as you think through and putting together your content marketing strategy, like what are some of the types of content that you would say fall into that evergreen type content?
There's a lot, and I think, you know, you can put your own spin on this, but what first comes to mind, definitely different guides. So maybe it's a how-to guide, maybe it's even a gift guide. You've got different pillar pages where a lot of maybe your written blog posts can kind of fall in line with. Definitely FAQ. If you don't have an FAQ, you should. And just different resources that will help the consumer almost onboard in a sense. And it's just providing that valuable content to act as a resource so you can further educate your consumers and kind of move them down that funnel.
Yeah, those are excellent, and it really kind of leads you into some of the stuff that's really fun, right?
Definitely. Yeah, well, and like I had said earlier, when used to I would think about content, I would only really kind of think about blog posts, and there's so much more than that. It's kind of like 5 years ago. Well, I mean, there's just a lot of different content pieces that can be exciting and add variation.
Actually, coming up here in a week and a half, it's 4 years since you started Elevated.
Oh my goodness. That's right. Time
Yeah.
goes by fast when you're having fun.
So, the other fun is then trending topics. So there's always topics that are, trending in your industry. And what do you feel like the split should be between, those evergreen topics and those like trending topics?
Yeah, it definitely takes me back to the podcast episode we did just a couple episodes ago of kind of that continuous marketing versus short term campaigns.
Yeah.
And it's what, about a 80-20% split? Am
Yeah.
I?
Yep. Yep. You should spend 80% on that, like, need it all the time. So that would be evergreen or continuous marketing. And then 20% on, trending topics, which might be, a campaign is just like a trending like item that's going on.
Yeah.
So
I think an example, though, that I would like to share with maybe more trending topics is we have got a client who is a luxury chauffeur service. And, there's a bunch of events in the summer around Indianapolis. And those are maybe some of the trending topics that we would talk about. Now,
yeah.
while it won't necessarily be relevant for the year of 2026, the same standards, stands, and those would maybe be our trending topics of which concert are you going to this summer?
There you go. So I feel like the next one, when thinking about your strategy, is usually what people think of sometimes. Well, I don't know if it's first, but it's definitely, a close second, if not a close first,
Yeah.
is, what is the format that you're going to create, like written, graphic, video, audio, and a lot of the ideas we've even given so far are really, written format. But today's consumer, definitely, I feel like you got to have this video first mentality,
Mhm.
and it needs to go into written. And You definitely have to have graphics that call that out that you'll use later in social media, and and then audio. We're doing a podcast here, but we say it a lot, but consumers like to consume content in multiple formats. So
Mm-hmm.
one topic can be broken down into 4 different formats.
Yep. And that's important. I mean, learning styles are always different. I think with a lot of these types of content formats, sometimes this can be coupled up with what stage of the funnel you're at too. So,
Yeah.
like keeping in mind the different learning styles, but also where your consumers are in the funnel with your content intention. That was a lot of words, but
A lot of valuable words, Brenna. So, within those different formats, like, we've given a lot, but like written is like blog post and how-to guides, and your FAQs on your website, and Q&A sections, but video, reels, explainers, webinars, behind the scenes. Audio is definitely podcasts, but audio clips, which I know we haven't done in our own marketing in a while.
Mm,
Live event recordings, that certainly falls into this as well. We're taking advantage of video, audio, and live event all at once. So that's
yeah.
super efficiency. Graphics, so infographics, carousels, branded templates, tips that are pulling out within, these written pieces that you're doing. If you're feeling a little overwhelmed already, it's okay.
Yeah.
Content is the most important, but it can be overwhelming.
There's a lot of components to it and a lot to think through. And I think it progressively gets a little bit more difficult just because of, where we are today. There's so much content out there, and creating that content, in quotations, I'm saying it gets easier. It's not easy, but there's just quicker ways to do it with AI and
Yeah,
more quotations.
well, you just get quicker in general
Mhm.
when you kind of take off the, like, well, that's hard. Well, it's all
Yeah.
hard. Choose your
Yeah.
hard, and just do what you can, but keep pushing the envelope in order to get better, and you start creating efficiencies. The last one is, well, not the last one, but really, I think people sometimes, this is the one I do think people think of first, is
Mhm.
where is this content going to go? And that might be just a function of, oh, well, I'm an email marketer, I'm a social media, and so I will think of first where it's going to go and then work backwards to the content strategy. And you got to start with that overarching content strategy and then think, okay, I have this strategy and I have this buyer persona and I have this buying cycle and I've come up with these topics and I'm making it into different formats. And okay, well, now I'm going to promote it.
Mhm.
And I'm going to promote it in multiple different ways and multiple times.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and first and foremost, there are many different platforms to share and promote your content, but first and foremost, you want to own your content. So that would mean it's maybe on your Well, it should definitely be on your
I'll
website.
say maybe. It is on
It
your
should
website.
definitely be. But I do think something else, though, that a lot of people don't consider, I guess, maybe owning is your email marketing.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you do own your list. So that
Yeah.
is another owned platform, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's all the other places, which, because sometimes be where people are spending the most time. Like, I get it. Like, social media is, but, and so you need to create things for social media, but make sure it makes it back to your website and the email, because you don't own these platforms, and the format that is going to work on social media is usually short-lived, and things are constantly changing in algorithms. So you can really put yourself at a disadvantage if you're entire content strategy is nothing but where you're putting it at, not your home base.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. Like you're saying, I mean, organic social media in general, a lot of it is very short-lived. It's,
Yeah.
we would love for everything to come back around kind of like the trends do, but that's not always the case.
No, no. So this is the one that don't give up too early.
Mm-hmm.
Like, content is a consistent and consistently being out there. And the moment you stop producing content, you start giving people no reason to pay attention to you. And you almost have to be that level of persistence, annoyance, whatever you want to call that, they're going to listen. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and the more you produce content, the better you get at it, because you have that practice and you have to maintain a consistent schedule, but make it sustainable too. I think sometimes people get really ambitious at first, and I'm going to create this much content, and then it fails because it was more than what was achievable.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather see, I'm going to do this one brick, and I'm going to lay this one brick at a time, and then over time it builds up to more so that it's more sustainable, than to set out, something that's not realistic.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a very good point. It's setting those realistic goals, but also, you can be consistent with it. But if you're producing content that's not of super high quality, then that consistency and that time you're putting in,
Wasted.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, you can still be consistent while producing lower quantities because your strategy is consistent, your promotion is consistent, and the other layers that you're adding on top of one content topic, it's all consistent. More does not necessarily mean better.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap it up in the bow. The last one, of course, is to monitor, measure, and optimize. And we've written an entire, post on this, but depending on the platform, what you're really looking for is engagement rate. And, if I'm looking at the website, I want to know the engagement rate. I want to know the scroll behavior on the piece of content. I want to know the time on the page.
Mhm.
Uh, those are all leading indicating factors that will in turn help drive traffic. And so if you don't have those items, then, you know, it's not going to happen. Now, if it's just SEO that you're looking at, don't be waiting on the search engines. Make sure you have a proper promotion. And
Mhm.
then over in, maybe social media, you really want to look at what's the reach,
Yeah.
and probably engagement first. If it has great engagement, like you're getting those comments, likes, and shares, then you will get the reach.
Mhm.
And that's how you know you've produced a good piece of content. And then email marketing, what's your open rate? What's your click rate? That lets you know that you are producing great content. And even, what's your list rate growing? Like, how
Mhm.
often are you growing that list? Um, those are all great, great metrics. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think the engagement, that's where what we keep hearing, and that it is telling of your content and whether or not your audience is finding value in your content is those engagement rates.
yeah. So there's really no final word in content. Content is consistent and always, and content is marketing. So
Yep.
you always have to be producing it, and you always have to be going after it, and it's always going to be hard, and it's always going to be difficult. But I think when you go through the strategy we kind of laid out here today, that will help put you in a better place.
Yeah, I hope so.
All right. Well, that's it for today. If you enjoyed today's content, certainly Follow us on LinkedIn, especially me, Jennifer Denny. There is a newsletter on there, but there's also, if you'd like, in your inbox, if you go over to elevatedmarketing.solutions, you will find all over our website and the ability to sign up to that as well. All right, take care.